Hello, everyone. Hello, dear colleagues who are joining us right now. There are 2 minutes before the first day of Macmillan Back to School annual conference starts. So please find the chat box and put pluses, yes, whatever you can to let us know that you are here, that you are safe, that you are hearing us, that you are seeing us. And if it is possible for you, please type the place where you are from. For example, I'm now in at my home. I'm in Hostomel, which is not far from Kiev, as you know. And our speaker, she will tell you herself where she's from right now. So it's Kiev here. And it's Dnipro here, and again, Kyiv is here, and Kremenchuk is here, Kharkiv is here, Poltava, Lvivsky region, Kryvyi Rih, Ternopil, Lviv, again, Ternopil, Cherkasy, again, Kyiv, Zhytomyr, Donetsk region, Zaporizhia, Uman. Gosha, you know, as usual, we do have the whole geography of the country represented here at our webinar. It's really amazing. So it's 3 p.m. Kiev time, and we are ready to start the first day of our annual conference. I'm Inna Nistaiter, and I work for Macmillan Education Ukraine, and I would like to greet all the participants. And before I give the floor to our speaker, I would remind you several things. The first thing is that this webinar is being recorded. So in case you have problems with the internet connection, problems with electricity, and especially huge problem with air raid alarm, please make sure that you're in the safe place, and don't worry, you will receive the recording of this day one conference. And of course, you will receive the certificate of participants. And now I'm giving the floor to our speaker, whom many of you already know very well. It's Gosha Mroz. Gosha, the audience is all yours.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, as always, we have people from all over the country. I usually connect from Hamburg, which is where I live, but currently I'm actually connecting from London, which is where I'm visiting my family. So we have a very international setup here, and thank you everyone for coming. And yeah, let's kick off. Let me just share my screen because we definitely need it. And let me just check if all of you can see my screen. If you can all see the slides, you can write it in the chat window. I'm just going to open it on the side. Okay. Just a moment. Okay, I'll have to adjust it just a little bit. Okay, you should be able to see the first slide from first words to first sentences. I see pluses, I see yeses. So I believe everything is fine. All right. So yeah, let's kick off. And today, in today's session, we will talk about building English skills from scratch. Now, before we decided on this session, I got quite a lot of information from Macmillan Ukraine, and we have collected your feedback and requests on things that you either want some hints on, or maybe you struggle with a little bit, or some things that you need inspiration with. And this is what popped up, and this is what we decided to address this time in the session. So starting lessons with and teaching English to very young learners. Actually, let's just establish the starting point. So we are talking about the first year of school. So it's the first school experience for most of your students. And it's the first time they're going to experience a bit more structured learning. And by structured learning, I don't mean that they're going to, sit and have a very tight schedule, but there is more structure to school than there is to kindergarten. Also, maybe some of your students haven't gone to the kindergarten. Maybe they were at home with their parents. You know, there are always different stories, and I am not sure, but I believe in most countries, kindergarten is not mandatory. So sometimes the kids actually start this more like structured education from school, from the first grade. And from what I know, most of your students, when they start school, they're going to be about 6 years old. So again, very little children. And because they're very little, because they're just starting school, they do not have the knowledge of the language whatsoever. They might know some words. Maybe they had classes in the kindergarten, but maybe not. And there will be a lot of students for whom this is going to be the first contact with English and English lessons. So let's assume they have no knowledge of the language whatsoever, and therefore they don't have the knowledge of the English alphabet, right? At this point, they will gain it and they will develop the skill later on. But when they start, they cannot read, they cannot write yet. And speaking of that, let's think of some challenges that you as teachers of them are facing at the very beginning. And this is based on on the information that you gave us, that you provided. So first of all, the alphabet. Now, the thing about Ukrainian students is that at the age of 6, they will be learning two alphabets simultaneously, because the English alphabet is different to the Ukrainian alphabet. I don't have to tell you that. And they will have to do two things at the same time, which, for example, for students in Poland, which is, what I work with, we have some Polish letters, but it's still the Latin alphabet. It's the same alphabet as English with some additional letters, and of course, different sounds. But in your case, the challenge is slightly different. So that's the first thing. Another thing is that because they don't know the alphabet, they are not able to read even short texts like speech bubbles, right? They might not be able to do it. They might already recognize the Ukrainian letters because, they're exposed to, they have high exposure to the Ukrainian language. They can see, words in shops, they have books for children and so on and so forth. Now, they might not have had this exposure to the Latin or the English, specifically English alphabet. So naturally, this is another challenge. And it's also connected with yet another thing, which is writing. They might already be able to write, for example, their names in the Ukrainian alphabet, but not necessarily in the Latin alphabet. Now, of course, they have seen the Latin alphabet before. I mean, I'm going to say the English alphabet. They have probably seen some words. Maybe they had some books also in English or any other languages that uses the same alphabet. Maybe they have some toys, or maybe in some cartoons. So it's not like they've never seen it before, but definitely they would be much more familiar with their native alphabet. And on top of that, if that's not enough of a challenge, although these three things are quite closely connected, right? But if it's not enough, then there is one more thing, which I also know from you, which is something that, as a matter of fact, every teacher struggles with, which is time restrictions, right? Because ideally, we would teach, very small groups of children, like 4 students. Imagine having a group of 4 students. So it's like enough to do pair work or group work or have some games, but also not too many. So you can, give them enough attention and so on. And ideally, you would have lessons like, 1 hour every day, Monday to Friday, right? So they can really make quick progress and so on. But sadly, it's not the case for the vast majority of us. And usually we have much less time with our students and they're in much bigger groups. If you could write in the chat window how many lessons a week you have, is it like 2 times 45 minutes? Maybe it's 3 times 45 minutes, or maybe it's 2 times 30 minutes. I'd be curious to find out, because I do know that it's not as often as we would have in the ideal world, but I'm also curious about some specifics. So feel free to write it in the chat window. I should see it in a moment. So remember about all this, I want us to be real. Now, I don't want to, talk about things that are completely unrealistic, and I want to take your context into consideration, and I really want to be real, there is only so much we can do. There are certain things that we just cannot do and we want to, and we're looking for solutions. But again, there's only so much you can do. So we can't just magically overcome all the struggles. We can't hope for all the issues that I have just mentioned to just magically sort themselves out. This is not going to happen, and I think we just have to agree that this is not the case. And sometimes, and this is something that I also know from you, you can't fully rely on the methods that are known to be effective and they are well researched, but because of your context and because, for example, you have lessons just like I see now, twice a week, 35 minutes, or 3 times a week, 40, 45 minutes, because you don't have lessons every day. And sometimes maybe you have to call off the lessons. Sometimes something happens because of this context. I am aware that certain things, you just don't have the time to do everything you would want to do. Now, I want to make it very clear here that the fact that you can't always rely fully on these methods, such as, for example, what is sometimes referred to as sightseeing, for example, but not sightseeing like, when you travel, but sightseeing in a sense that we teach the students to read words, not letters, right? So instead of seeing or teaching them that words are combinations of letters, we just read the word, for example, mum or school, not letter by letter and combining them together, but as whole units. So I know that these methods you're familiar with and you maybe have tried them, maybe you use them, but I also know that sometimes, and this is again the information that I got from you, sometimes you just don't have enough time to do it. Because also you have the curriculum, right? And that a lot of things that you want to teach, a lot of material you want to cover. So I am very aware of that, but I also still think that, I know for a fact that these methods can be really effective. They are well researched, they are well, practiced by a lot of teachers. And I will get back to it and I will show you how to do it a little bit later. So, but I just want to establish that the fact that you can't fully rely on them doesn't mean they don't work. They do. But I also understand that due to your context, due to certain limitations, you might feel that they fail you at times. All right. So this I just want to make clear. But I also have some good news because we didn't start on a very positive note. We just start, the school year is about to start, and we're like, oh yeah, this is difficult, this is challenging, oh, this is going to be a struggle, but there are also some good things. Let's have a look at them to maybe change the mood a little bit, because there's a lot that we can do. We can, for instance, take these methods that some of you said don't necessarily always work for you because of various factors, like, for example, the time limitations and so on. We can incorporate them slowly and methodically throughout the course, bit by bit. Whenever possible, whenever convenient, whenever you have 5 minutes to spare, you can do it just a little bit here, a little bit there. It's also a solution. You can also do it bit by bit, step by step. It doesn't have to be, the main part of your curriculum. We can also look at the materials that we work with as sort of guidelines. So if you have a course book or if you have any sort of materials, you don't necessarily have to do all of it. And I know that sometimes it might be a bit counterintuitive and it might be tricky. And I personally had a bit of a problem with some parents of my students who said, hey, why don't you cover the whole material, right? Why did you skip this exercise in this unit? And I had to explain, but I still believe that the course book is a certain frame for our course, and it's supposed to show us the direction, but ultimately we are the decision makers. So bear that in mind. That's good news. That's good news. There's a lot of room for flexibility. We can also take the selective approach, and we can just pick the activities that are relevant to our students and their level and their context and the fact that they can or cannot read or write. We're going to have a look at more details in a moment. And of course, we can, exploit all additional materials, alphabet books, for example, some free materials they can also get where you can practice writing. I mean, your students can practice writing letters and little motor skills, and that a lot of games, game banks also, right? And that a lot of exercises that help children make associations between the shapes of letters and the sound and so on. And last but not least, but this is probably the most important thing that once I learned has become a game changer to me in life, in every aspect of it, which is this motto that I keep repeating, keep reminding myself of. It's not all or nothing. I tend to go all in. So it's like, all or nothing, but actually it's not, right? You can do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It doesn't mean that you fail. If your students are like 60% successful, not 100, it's fine. It's not all or nothing. Keep that in mind. I will also keep reminding you throughout this session. So the plan for today's session and for the upcoming parts of it is, first, we'll have a look at the very, very first lessons that you're going to have with your 6-year-olds and the very first words and sentences that we are teaching. Then we will take a sample unit, one of the first units in a course book. I am going to take Academy Stars, but whichever course book you work with, I'm just going to rely on the scope and sentence and, and at the sequence, sorry. And at the beginning, you have, unit 1 and you have the skills and so on. So we're going to have a look at it and make do a short analysis of the content and the skills that our students need in order to successfully complete this section. So the first or the first 2 units. And we will also have a look at which parts of it are already achievable and which aspects will require a little bit more build up, lead in, a little bit more preparation. Then we will also look at 3 different kinds of tasks at your request. So we're going to have a look at the tasks that help us develop communication and speaking, generally communicating and language. We will have a look at reading and we will have a look at writing, taking into consideration the fact, or even putting it at the forefront, that your students cannot read and cannot write. So we will see what to do with reading and writing, which we also have to teach. So sounds a bit contradictory, but we will figure this out. And one more thing I want to mention before we jump into the very first lessons that we have with our students is that there is tons of research on bilingual children who also have to learn 2 alphabets. Now, I know that the students that you teach, they might be, but the majority of them are probably not bilingual. So they learn a new language. It's not like they have 2 first languages. But there are a lot of bilingual kids who, for example, have, I don't know, Japanese parents, but they live in the UK. So they will learn 2 different writing systems at some point. And it's something that has been happening for a long time. And it's something, again, well researched. There's a lot of resources on the internet showing how to practice, how to tackle it. So what I want to say is that your context is slightly different. I mean, it's quite different to, for example, the students in Poland or in Spain or in Germany, but also that like children manage to learn 2 alphabets, sometimes even 3 alphabets. I am actually currently staying in London with my family with my 3-year-old bilingual nephew, who his parents are Polish, so his native language is Polish, but also he goes to an English nursery here in the UK. So actually his first language is also English, and he tends to mix up the languages and make very, very funny sentences. So this is not something unique to your situation. A lot of teachers also tackle this issue, and children are absolutely capable of doing that, absolutely capable of learning 2 alphabets. You also know to teach older students who already know the alphabet. So I would say do not underestimate your students. They can do amazing things. Sometimes we could learn the enthusiasm from them as well. So just wanted to mention that this is something that is well supported by also evidence and has been going on around the world for a long time. So we can now draw from the experience of children who have already mastered two alphabets or writing systems. Okay, the first steps. So the very first lessons, the beginning of the school year, the children come to our classroom, they don't speak the language yet, they don't know the alphabet. And usually, if you look at the materials that you're going to be working with, naturally, we start with hellos, goodbyes, and maybe some short commands or short polite exchanges, and so on. So I'd like you to have a look at the slide now and write in the chat window, remembering that your students cannot read yet. So whatever you see in the speech bubbles, they do not see. Do you think your students are able to read the pictures without reading the text? And maybe just to limit it to one thing, maybe let's have a look at this picture. This is from support materials for learning writing and some short phrases that come with course books. I believe there are like free materials that you can get along with your course book. So can your students understand the commands without being able to read them? What do you think? And if you could write it in the chat window. Oh yeah, I see some pluses. Yeah, absolutely. They can. Yes, they can see the images. They can see the pictures. Absolutely. They can guess from the context. I think the pictures are quite clear, right? So if you do this, I think it's, the gestures are usually quite international, I'd say. So if you take a book and say, close the book or open the book, I don't have a book at hand, but even without it, this is quite a clear gesture. Stop, right? Or like stand up, sit down, point, all of these gestures are very, very clear, right? So in this case, in case of the very first exercises that we have in our course books, the written language, so the speech bubbles, is just a means to achieve a completely different goal, because the goal is for the children to communicate, right? So it's a communicative goal, not writing or reading. This is not the aim of the lesson for the children to be able to read the commands. They need to understand them, because then they come to the classroom and you say, hello, sit up. All right, now sit down and open your books, right? They don't need reading at all. But what happens often is when you do, you have the first lessons, you have the hellos, goodbyes, maybe even how are yous, and so on. Usually in most course books, the next thing the students learn is the alphabet, right? So look, we have it's lesson 1, 2, 3. Here you can see lesson 2, lesson 3. Usually it's spread across like 3 or 4 lessons, and you have the whole alphabet, which kind of on the one hand makes sense, right? Because it seems very natural to us to, first give the students certain tools that they can use to do more elaborate tasks like reading and writing, right? So you want to give them the letters so they can create. So it kind of makes a lot of sense. But then again, if you look at what your students are capable of, especially within the first, let's say, month or 2, it's not going to be reading or writing. They will probably not learn the alphabet in, 3 lessons, right? So let's say here the alphabet is supposed to take 3 lessons. It's going to take much longer, right? Because they could probably learn it, but they also need some time to process it, to practice it, and so on. So what they can do immediately, and what's very natural for them, is communication. This is what they do on a daily basis, right? So look, like before they learn the Ukrainian alphabet, they can already communicate in the language, right? So reading and writing is not the skill that they need. So also knowing the alphabet is not the skill that they need at the very beginning in order to use the language, right? Because again, in their native language, they don't know the alphabet yet as well, right? So we can actually build the first meetings with our students and the first lessons without necessarily relying on the alphabet. And even though you do see quite a lot of text here, and I'm going to address it a little bit later in more detail, the students don't really need it in order to perform the task with our support and our guidance. And if you look at this example, do you think the students would still be able to do the task, let's say task 1, sing the song, without being able to read the letters? Do you think it's possible for them to learn a song without reading the text? All right, I see a lot of yeses in the alphabet, and some of you already say, yeah, they can compare the letters. They can, even if they don't know the letters, they can maybe recognize the shapes. So for example, orange starts with a circle, right? And in this case, all colors actually, except for black and blue, all of them would start with different letters, right? So they can also, try to look at words as shapes and try to find shapes. But of course, like with a song, they can just listen to it and repeat, just like children learn at the very beginning, just like they learn their native language as well. With the second task, they can, just like you said, compare the letters, but also, I mean, frogs are green, right? And the sun is yellow and oranges are orange. So most of these things they can color without reading the names. The trick is with the jug, which is purple here, and the hat, which is blue and red. So here, of course, they would need your support, but you can simply tell them the colors, you can show the flashcards, or you can say, okay, so we have green, yellow, orange, black, and white. These colors we have used already. Which colors are left? And they only have 3 colors left, and maybe they can decide, which color to use for which object. So again, they don't have to read the names of colors in order to do the task and to color the objects, right? And let's have a look at another example. Again, we are at the very beginning of the school year, the very first lessons. And on the right side, we have the numbers. And again, the words are written here. And I think it's very important that they are written because some students will actually learn the words quite fast and will start to recognize the patterns and will, for example, start to recognize the words, right? So even without focusing on reading here, because we are not reading yet, we haven't done the alphabet yet, the students can already, be like get some exposure, right, and familiarize themselves with how words are written. But also, instead of reading the words, your students can simply read the digits, which are the same in Ukrainian. And they can also, if they cannot read the digits yet, although I believe most of them probably can, they can simply listen to your instructions. And you, as a teacher, can, for instance, make flashcards. If you don't have the flashcards that represents these objects, because maybe you don't have like a flashcard with a key, you can quickly draw it. I actually used an free online whiteboard, and I just drew these pictures. If you teach online, or maybe you have a computer in your classroom, if not, just pieces of scrap paper, and it takes like no more than 5 seconds to draw something. Doesn't have to be beautiful, it just has to have a proper shape. So you just show the object and they have to count. So you show an apple and they have to count apples and shout out the number. Again, the target language here is the numbers, right? So they have to be able to count things and to say how many things they see, not to write down the numbers. So if you open your book, and I know that this has been a concern for a lot of teachers, understandably, and it makes a lot of sense that you might not be sure what to do with it if you have students who don't read yet. And it will take some time for them to learn to read and write, because they, instead of, learning 26 or like 30 letters, they have to learn 60 of them because it's 2 alphabets. But if you see a book that from the very beginning is quite full of text, so for example, speech bubbles and so on, I would say take it easy, chill, because after all, your main focus is communication from day one. So speaking of that, let's have a look at what I call the big picture. So we're going to take a sample unit from a course book. And this is something that I always do at the beginning of the school year, whether I work with children or with adults, teenagers, doesn't matter. I look at the materials. And if I work with a book, because sometimes I work on authentic materials, then I prepare it. But if not, I work with the book. I look at the scope and sequence and I go unit by unit and I just see, okay, so this is what's going to happen this year. This is what's going to happen within the next, let's say, 6 to 10 lessons. All right. So I want to know where I'm heading. So I would never just open the book and go page by page. I want to know what's going on, because then also it gives me more flexibility to, maybe change the order and so on. So we're going to have a look at one unit. All right. The first unit I took because we're talking about the very beginning, building English skills from scratch from the first lesson. So we're gonna start with the first unit, and we will do a very short analysis of the content, and we will see which parts are already achievable, which need a bit more preparation. So here's unit 1, my funny friends. We are going to learn some vocabulary describing people, and the words here would be like big, small. I think it's big, small, tall, short, funny. These would be the adjectives, and also girl, boy, and teacher, I believe. I hope I'm not confusing anything, but I think it's, from what I remember, it's this. So we have a couple of words describing people. We have some grammar. So to be, I'm Beth. So it's also part of the, communication, introductions, and just first interactions in English. And then we also have language in use. So we have, and a friend. Thank you, Antonina. Thank you. There was also a word, friend. So then we have language in use. We're going to ask simple questions. So what's your name? How old are you? Right? And then we have answers. I'm 7, or I'm Beth, I'm 7. Right? So we really have 4 phrases, right? 2 questions, 2 answers. And then we have reading, which is short, sort of like name cards with 2-3 sentences, very basic information. So the students have to read for gist without much detail yet. Then in listening, they use pictures to help understanding, right? So they will listen to a song or listen to a dialogue, and they would have to, for example, choose a correct picture. Greet people, greet and meet. So it's still very similar to grammar and language in use. Then we have writing, in which we have information card, where you have your name and your age and maybe where you're from. Finally, phonics and skills. So we have short R sound and capital letters. So if you look at this, the question is, remembering that your students can't read yet, which tasks are either unachievable at this moment, or and which tasks can be performed with little or no preparation? So maybe which parts, for now, which parts are just impossible to do with the students who can't read, can't write? I know it sounds like an obvious question, but I don't know, maybe it isn't. So which parts they definitely can't do before they learn the alphabet? All right. Yeah, the tall robot is black. And reading is unachievable. Exactly. If you don't know if they don't know the alphabet, they cannot read, right? It makes a lot of sense. So reading, sadly, not yet. Anything else that they can't do yet, except for reading, without knowing the letters, right? Without knowing the letters. Anything else that would be a bit tricky at this point? I'd say also writing, right? So if they don't know the letters, they can't read, but they can't write either. So these 2 things will be tricky. And because of that, also parts of phonics and skills, as Olena has written, Antonina has written, capital letters, right? I mean, they don't have the tools yet to do it, so they don't know the letters yet, not to mention distinguishing, between capital and small letters. Okay. So still, if you have a look at this, these are the tasks they cannot perform in Unit 1. So let's say within the first couple of weeks of education, but you can already see that there is this incredible amount of skills they can already develop even without these 2 tasks. So here's the thing. If this is what you're going to be doing, and you can't do listening and you can't do writing yet, what should we do with it? shall we just, get rid of, just omit the reading and writing parts in the units until, until they learn. So let's say it's going to take them about 3 months to learn reading and writing on a very basic level. So shall we just omit it for the first 3 units and then slowly get to it? I am not sure, but to be honest, it doesn't sound like a good idea to me. And I see that I see a lot of no's in the chat window. I mean, I'll say yes and no. So would I omit it? To some extent, but rather than just omitting it completely and ignoring it, I would replace it with small units of alphabet practice, including also practicing little motor skills. So, for example, tracing dotted lines and so on and so forth. We're going to have a look at specific writing exercises in a moment. But so here's that's what I mean when I talk about flexibility and the selective approach. Okay, I am in unit 1. I have reading and writing there. I cannot do reading and writing, but I can use this time to introduce the first letters to start alphabet practice. You can also make alphabet practice part of every lesson, 5 minutes, right? So just tracing 1 letter or 2 letters, right? So replace it. Take other materials again. So here I am using these materials, the materials that you can see, the green one with letters J, K, L, and this little dotted pattern. I take it from the materials that you also have the access to, just a free alphabet book that is supposed to help you. It's kind of like a supplement, right? So you can just use it. And remember to take it step by step and allow enough time for the students to, to understand and practice the more challenging parts. So the alphabet, while developing communicative skills, which will also give them confidence. And the more familiar they are with the language, the easier it will be to learn the alphabet because they will already have a better concept of the language they're speaking, even on the word level or very, very short sentence level. So since I keep talking about communication and that you should, it's a good idea to focus on communication. I would like to show you 2 exercises that help develop communication. So 2 activities that you can use at the very beginning of the school year, but also later on, because these activities, you probably have heard about the first one. You can just use it with pretty much everything, be it vocabulary, grammar, whatever you want. Because we're focusing on communication, I'm going to focus on grammar here and phrases and practicing phrases. So the first one is called Grammar Spy. You might be familiar with the game I Spy with my little eye, or I Spy with my eye. There are a lot of variations here. And to play Grammar Spy, the only thing you need is a structure that you want to practice, and either some sheets of paper, like scrap paper. I don't know about you, but when I still worked in a physical school, I always had a pile of papers that were just old handouts and so on. So I would just reuse them. So you can use this, you can use a kitchen towel maybe for that, like the cardboard roll inside, or toilet paper roll. Or if you don't have these things, then you just use your hands, or actually your students will use your hands to create a little lunette, because the point here is to create a lunette. So you can just roll a piece of paper, you can use the cardboard tube, or your students can just use their hands so they can look around, but their vision will be very much limited. So it's a very simple exercise. I'm sure that some of you, if not most of you, have played it already. So this is just a reminder that those things exist and can really facilitate practicing communication. So here's what happens. Here's how I use it. So I have my students, especially if you have bigger groups, they sit in a circle, and there is one student in the middle. Now here, the structure that I want to practice, this is the first unit, so this is the beginning of our school year, is I am, he is, and she is. Now that's already quite a lot of grammar, so I divide it into chunks. First, I'm going to practice I am or I'm, and then in the second or third round, I'm going to practice he's, his, and so on. So the students sit in a circle, and there's one student in the middle, the little spy, and the little spy has a lunette. Again, hands or paper, doesn't matter. And the students who sit in the circle, they take turns and they say sentences from the grammar box. So in this case, you point to a student and the student has to tell their names. For example, I'm Jana, or I'm tall, or whichever words you practice. Here we have words to describe people. So you can also say I'm short, for example, right? Or I'm funny. Or you can go with names. Here you decide on the scope, right? Because you know your students best, so you know if they should start with their names only, or maybe they can already add the adjectives. So when one student in the circle that you have pointed to says the sentence, the spy in the middle has to turn around and has to find this student. And then usually I would add a little bit more language to that. And I would say, okay, so when you find the student, you have to say, hello, how are you? Or for example, hello, Jana. And then Jana says, hello, Tom. And then they say goodbye. And then the next student would, the students would switch and then, they take turns and so on. So it's a very simple game, zero preparation, but a lot of communication that requires no reading, no writing skills whatsoever, but you can already drill a little bit longer exchanges. So not just I'm Beth, but also I'm Beth. Hello, how are you? Goodbye. Right? Now, in the second round, I want to make it a little bit more difficult. So in the second round, maybe in the same lesson, maybe in the next lesson, again, you would have to decide based on what your students can do. So in the next round, the students would make sentences about other students. So for example, there is a student in the middle with a lunette. They can only look through the lunette. They cannot look around. They just see with one eye with a lunette. And you point to one student from the circle who has to say, he's tall, or she's 6, or she's funny. And then the student in the middle has a bit wider choice, right? And has to find the student who is tall, or who is 6, or who is funny, say their name, they switch, and the game continues, right? So again, I take it easy and I take it step by step. I know it's one lesson here with I am and he, she is. I like to, again, take it easy because it's a lot. It's already quite complex, and that also long full forms like I am and shorter like I'm. Step by step, again, not all or nothing. They don't have to master it in one lesson. We can just stretch it, and that's fine. So what I like about this game is that it has this element of fun because like children, they, especially when they spin around, they tend to get a little bit wobbly, and and it's funny. There's the element of mystery, right? Especially if you build the whole story that, okay, we're going to play detectives. But you can also practice short dialogues, not only words. So we move on from the word level, from first words to first sentences and first longer exchanges. And of course, you can do it with pretty much any grammar, any dialogue that you want. For example, you can ask one student to point to something in the classroom, and then they have to look at it, and the students ask questions. Is it blue? Is it red? Is it an apple? Is it a pen? Right? So, like, again, you can really, it's a game that requires zero preparation. You can play it all the time. It's always fun. It's like Simon says, children just don't get bored of this game, and it allows you to practice. There's a lot of communication going on. Also with, for instance, this and that. So this is my grandma, that's your grandma. So here in this is the second unit. So the context is family. The students will already be familiar with a little bit more letters, but they still can't read. But they can do is draw pictures of their, I don't know, family, friends, animals, whatever the topic is. So I have my pictures here, and my peer has their pictures here, and I see, let's say, this is my dog, that is your cat, right? So this and that we practice with a lunette. Of course, after that, you can do the follow-up, and you can already, ask your students to write longer chunks, even if they're not familiar with all the letters. They can simply, trace them, or you can, for example, model it on a board and ask them to, to try to copy it. So even if they don't yet have the full understanding of the alphabet, they can already do it. It's practicing motor skills. and they will get used to the shape of words. So again, this exercise I would probably do with a lot of modeling and a lot of support, but I would still do it. Even if at first it's like, oh, I'm not sure what I'm doing, like the students might be a bit, probably not overwhelmed, they're going to have fun, but it might be a challenge. Even if they don't have the full understanding, just do it, and, the more the right, the easier it's going to become. All right, the second exercise is called the Olympic Games, and I call it the Olympic Games because it's TPR based, and because we have just had the Olympic Games that I didn't follow, but I watched some, I read some commentary. So I didn't watch the games, but I have heard of some achievements. And what you need for this game is a set of flashcards. Again, be it ready flashcards or flashcards that you can quickly prepare, or maybe post-its, whatever you can stick to the backs of your students. And you can do it with safety pins, although be careful because they're sharp, but you can also use paper clips or I think with a paper clip, you can just attach it to the collar, or you can also use the pegs. So you can just, pegs are the safest because they can't hurt a child, and it's very easy to, attach even something that is a bit heavier. So if you have cardboard flashcards, it should also work. And this game is based on the listening comprehension. So again, we have the listening comprehension, and there's a lot of questions there and yes, no answers, but we assume our students cannot read yet. So what we can do is we can practice these phrases and then do the listening comprehension task when the students are already familiar with the language. So what we're going to do is we are going to pin or like somehow attach the flashcards to the back of the students. Now the flashcards have to represent the words we have in the question. So is it a present? Is it a book? So we have a present, book, umbrella, pencil case, and a picture. And the task is for each student to find out what they have on their back. Now they cannot see it, so they have to ask their peers. But because it's TPR based, they're going to be walking around the classroom, but I want to add a bit more movement here, and I want to add a twist. They cannot just come up to another student, say, for example, is it a book? And turn around. But what they can do is they can ask a question, is it a book? And then they have to jump and jump back. So they have to show their back very quickly, right? Of course, it never works great in a sense that, they're 6 years old, so they're still a little bit clumsy sometimes. And, but that's not the point. The point is to add the element of fun and practice communication, practice asking questions and finding out about the object. And there is also another variation of this game. So here, for instance, we can talk about feelings, and this variation is called sumo. And I found it on the internet. It's not my idea. I found it under different names. One was sumo, and one was, I think, I don't remember, something with animals. Doesn't matter. So this time, you have, let's say, mood flashcards. And again, each student has it on their back. And you're like the students sit in a circle, and you get two students in the middle. This game is just like, I love it. And they have to take the sumo pose, so like right, and they're going to be walking like that. So this time the task is slightly different because they have to find out what word is on the back of their opponent. So on the one hand, they have to try to see the flashcard, so the mood in this case of the other person. But at the same time, they have to make it difficult for the other person to see what's on their back. So they have to sort of like try to hide what they have while at the same time see what the other person has. Super difficult, super fun, always a bit messy, but the kids love it. Of course, it has to be, in a controlled environment. You don't want the children to fight. They cannot touch each other, right? They have to stay in the circle. They have to keep the distance. They cannot touch each other. And when they see what's there, they have to say the emotion by using the whole sentence. For example, she's happy. Oh, he's hungry. Oh, she's tired, right? Then, they take turns. So as you proceed with the material, you can also at some point change those flashcards with pictures into word cards, right? So then, you know, the game is a bit more difficult. It's based on reading already. So as they get to know the letters, as they're, you know, shown the words, yeah, maybe they're ready to, you know, or maybe they can have a picture and the name, right? So the name card or the word card, right? So you can also modify it. And as the school year goes, you can make it a bit more difficult. So that's communication. Now, let's have a look at the next type of exercises. I call it reading without reading. Because again, we're talking about the very beginning of the school year. Your students cannot read yet. There are two alphabets they're mastering. So it's going to take a bit more time. Maybe they can already read a little bit in Ukrainian, but maybe not in English yet. Reading without reading. The first reading, unit 1, what do you expect? Or maybe you know, if you're familiar with these books specifically, then you might know, but maybe you aren't, maybe you're using different books. What text do you expect to find under the cards with question marks? So what sort of information? It's probably not going to be a lot of text, right? Is the first reading, but yes, nationalities, because you can see the flags, right? Oh, something with the weather, yes, because there's the winter here and maybe the autumn or spring with the rain. It's not there, but that's a good idea. It could be there. Countries, yes, and I'm from exactly, right? Names, yeah. So the names are written, but they will probably also be written in a sentence. And maybe, yeah, what I do in the free time is the same unit in which we were describing the robots. So probably also some adjectives, right? Let's have a look. So the text goes, hi, I'm Katya, I'm from Ukraine. This is Olga, she's my friend, she's small. So we have some adjectives from the vocabulary section. And we have I'm Katya, right? I'm from, this would be new. So I am is not new. We have already played with I Spy. But I'm from is new, and she is tall. We know how to say, but she's my friend is also rather new. Um, but as you can see, you can pretty much recreate the whole text based solely on the visual information, right? You don't really need to read the text to be able to identify all parts of it, right? So sometimes it's clearer, sometimes maybe a bit less clear, but still with a little help of the teacher, it's possible to be done. Now, if you look at the text comprehension, reading comprehension exercise, it's based on matching the children with the countries. So, you know, so that's what the kids have to do at the very beginning. And what you can do here is actually have a look in your teacher's book. And I always recommend whichever course you work with, check out the teacher's book because they usually are so full of useful advice. And in this case, there is an alternative version of the reading exercise for children who are learning to read, especially in the new alphabet. That's your situation. And they cannot read fluently yet. So look what you can do with the reading task when your students cannot read yet. Say the names of the countries for the children to repeat. So first you're going to practice the flags, the countries, la la la, and then play the audio for each part of the text. And the children can look at the text. And when they hear the word with the country, they say stop. So you kind of treat the reading task more like a listening task, but not fully because they see the text and they will slowly but surely make the connection between what they hear and what they see. It's not happening consciously yet, but it's perfectly fine. We're taking it step by step. We're getting them, we're making them used to a different alphabet and different letters. And then there is task 3. So the reading comprehension task where you have to match the child with the country. And here's how you can challenge your students. And this is something that one of you or a couple of you even have mentioned before. But I just want to show you how it feels for your students who don't know the alphabet yet. So what they see, like you look at these words and you don't even have to read them. You just understand, right? But they don't. So this is roughly what they see. And I use the Armenian alphabet here because I know how to write things in Armenian. If any of you speak Armenian, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. I'm not going to show you where because it doesn't matter. But I hope you don't read Armenian, because that should show you what your students see. So if you ask them to, for example, compare the initial letters, which in this case are different for every child, this is what they see. So can you just write in the chat window which word, 1, 2, 3, or 4, is the word from the text? Can you just find the letter? Like, you can look at the initial letter or the whole word. Ah, yeah, there you go. All right, there you go. I wonder if you like suddenly a lot of people read Armenian. Probably not, right? It's not a very popular language. But this is, you see, it's perfectly doable, right? You look at the shapes. Again, this is what your students might see. So you know how it feels. It might be a bit of a challenge, but not necessarily, right? So yeah, so you can just do it like that and ask your students to find similarities. Now, let's have a look at another reading task. Now, this is going to be a little bit later as the second unit. So like probably it's going to be about 6 weeks after the first lesson, roughly. Well, it depends on, you know, the amount of time you have. So the first reading we did with our students as a reading/listening task, but still reading task, was 4 independent short pieces of text. Now here it's slightly different because here, rather than independent chunks, you have one continuous story, although still divided into chunks. But here you have a certain sequence, and if you read in a different order, it doesn't make sense, right? So your students will not be able to read the text at this point, probably. They might already be able to recognize some letters, to maybe read some words, but whole sentences might be still too challenging. Most likely they won't be able to do it. But look at the first picture. Can you name the objects that you see there? And I can tell you that, of course you can, right? And if you look at the third picture, for instance, can you name the colors? Of course you can, and so can your students. So do your students. And even if you look at the text, you can probably deduce, by you, I mean actually your students, they can deduce which words are names. So we have when and grandpa, and you can see that the names are on the left side, right? So you can already say like, okay, so it's like when grandpa, right? So you can already work on the text just by looking at it like, you know, a picture, not necessarily a combination of letters yet. So that's what you can do. And again, the way to approach it as a reading task, you can, again, it is taken from the teacher's book, right? So, but this is a great method, so there's no point reinventing the wheel. You play each part of the audio in turn. The students, they try to follow, especially since you have when and grandpa. So, you know, it's sequenced, right? So they can see where it changes. And when they hear the name of the objects that are in the comprehension exercise, they say stop and they point to it and they circle it, right? They circle the object or they circle the word with your support already, right? So this is also something that is sometimes referred to as the sight reading, right? So maybe, you know, reading the word paintbrush is going to be quite difficult letter by letter, but they just see it's this pen paintbrush. So they see it's a longer word, you know, so they, again, they don't see it as a combination of P and A and I and N and so on, but the whole word. So it's also the element of that. And in this approach to reading tasks, there's actually quite a lot of listening. But if you think about it, both reading and listening are receptive skills. So it's understanding the language as opposed to producing the language, right? So they both should be developed simultaneously, and turning reading into story time with elements of alphabet fun, like for example, recognizing the first letters and so on, will help your students understand longer stories. So it's still the comprehension of a story. And also, because as they listen, they see the text, they're getting more and more familiar, not even consciously, with the English writing system just by pure exposure, right? So they do the reading without the reading. And they can also do writing without writing really. So one last set of exercises I want to show you is writing without writing. And at the beginning, we said that maybe when we have the writing exercises at the very beginning, but your students do not know the alphabet yet, you can just replace them with writing practice. So let's talk about it in detail, starting with this. When you look at this alphabet, which you're very familiar with, and I am only to some extent, which letters do you think should be rather easy for your students to learn? Assuming that they're also learning the Ukrainian alphabet and they're already roughly more or less familiar with the Ukrainian alphabet. So which letters do you think should be easy? If you could just write them in the chat window. Right, or yes, or definitely. Uh-huh. All right, to also, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, s, I think s is tricky actually because in English it can be so it's s in English should be s, right? So this one is actually tricky, but as you can see, those that are the same in both languages, all very, very similar. So these are the letters. So it's A, E, I, K, M, O, T. Again, the same, all very similar. So for example, small m in Ukrainian looks like capital M in English. So small m would look slightly different, but still, like, you know, you can use capital letters. So these they should be quite familiar with. And which letters do you think can cause some difficulties at the beginning? All right, letter, all right, letters P or R, yeah, S, W, also letters that are a bit more difficult to write. I would say the letters that I circled here, that in Ukrainian you have one letter for the sound like U, for example, or ch, but in English it would be a combination of letters, right? So the letter Y would be written as YE or sh as sh, right? So this can be tricky in English, right? Because there's no one letter that represents the sound. In Ukrainian, you have, it's very convenient, by the way. So you have one letter to represent the sound. And also some letters that look very similar to the English alphabet, but represent different sounds. So false friends, right? So this exactly is the moment where you may want to treat your course book and the alphabet practice book as guidelines and be very flexible about it. Because usually in books, you would have the alphabet taught in the alphabetical order. So A, B, C, and so on. Now, of course, there are alphabet songs and so on. But if you could group the letters in other way than in the alphabetical order, how could you do it? Because I would say, I would actually start with teaching the letters that my students are already familiar with. So you can simply start with the letters that are similar to the Ukrainian alphabet, and then practice writing them by tracing the dotted line. It can be in the shape of the letter, or at least, you know, practicing the stroke, right? Which would be soft or just a straight line, depending on the letter, right? And of course, you can write them multiple times. You can turn them into pictures. Something that I always like doing with my students is turning letters into pictures. So then they could also write their name with the pictures. So if it's like the picture has to show something, the first letter of which is part of the picture, right? So if it's P, then it has to be something that starts with P and so on, right? So yeah, so we'll just turn them into pictures. And again, this should be quite fine for your students because they're already familiar with these letters. And then you can naturally use TPR to practice. So total physical response, so physical activities to practice the alphabet. And you can do it in various ways. I just typed in body alphabet on YouTube and I found two channels. The first two hits are very funny videos in which children learn to, you know, sing the alphabet and they make the shapes of the letters with their body. This one, Jack Hartman Kids Music Channel, is particularly cool because they also they say the letters. So for example, age. and then they make the sound. So it's letters and phonics, right? So you can simply play with this. And there are multiple videos that you can find easily, such as YouTube for kids, which will not have the adverts and will not have any content that the children should not see. You can also try this. Also, what I like doing with TPR is writing the letters with our feet, for example, or with our elbow. It's very difficult, but it's just about, making these associations and helping students remember different shapes, different strokes, and so on. And speaking of different shapes, the third thing you can do to practice the alphabet is, for example, show the whole alphabet to your students and ask them to pick the letters based on their similarities. For example, letters containing a circle. And then you can have fun with drawing the letters. Again, so this treats letters as pictures, really. So the students, they look for similarities, they look for the details before they become fluent in writing. And then it can be a circle, it can be like something that can be written inside the circle. So letter E, E, right, for example. Or maybe two circles and the letter S in it, right? So you can have a lot of fun with it depending on what you need and which letters you're practicing. So again, that's what I mean by saying selective approach and treating the book as your guidelines. So I would not go A, B, C. I would actually, just mix the alphabet and choose different criteria for teaching the letters and just change the order completely, because ultimately I don't want my students to be able to sing the whole alphabet and then go LMNOP instead of LMNOP. This is what happens in Poland. It's always LMNOP, like one word, So yes, we will sing the alphabet, but more like fun as a fun song, but not necessarily for learning the alphabet, because I want my students to write and I want my students to also associate the letters with the sounds. So they don't necessarily need to know the word or W, they need to say W, right? So think about it this way. And last but not least, another thing you can do when you want to practice the alphabet is you can use minimal pairs to introduce new letters. You teach a word, let's say bad, you have good, bad, and then you just change one letter. So bad turns into bat, which turns into bag, which turns into bug, which turns into bus. And then mom, mommy, moo, mood. You can even, practice. I mean, I usually try to rely on the words that exist, but you can also use some made up words like, moo, moo, or sounds or whatnot, right? So, and this also will help your students write without writing. Again, it's going to take some time, but it's not all or nothing. So remember, give your students the time. They will not master the alphabet in one lesson, not even in 5 lessons, or maybe they would need like 3 months for that, maybe the whole year. And sometimes they will write the letters upside down. Sometimes the S letter would be just completely wrong. Sometimes they will probably confuse the Ukrainian letters and the English letters. It's okay. It's fine. Again, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's not all or nothing, step by step. And just focus on communication. Remember about positive reinforcement, and you should be fine. So because we have to be finishing, let me quickly just 1 minute to sum it up so you get your takeaways, you remember what we talked about, and as soon as you start the school year, which is very soon, you can maybe try these things out. First of all, stay grounded, think realistically, do not panic, chill. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be messy. It's gonna take some time. There will be a lot of mistakes. It's perfectly fine. Just do your job, do it best as you can, have a lot of fun, and focus on communication. The book is just your set of guidelines, right? So you don't have to do everything in this order. Take the alphabet part, and instead of starting with teaching the alphabet, start with communication, start with hello, start with something that your students are excited about, and do the alphabet on the side. Don't make it like, don't feel bad about skipping it at the very beginning. You can always get back to it bit by bit, chunk by chunk. Explore reading without reading. Remember that reading is a receptive skill and so is listening. So take as much as you can from what's around the text, from the recording, from the pictures. Again, use it for communication, use it for alphabet practice, but don't worry if you see the text in the book that your students cannot read yet. There's plenty that you can do without reading the text. Practice little motor skills, use TPR for the alphabet. Alphabet doesn't necessarily have to be writing the letter A or 10,000 times. You can write it with your body, you can write it with your nose if you want to, you can turn it into pictures. Do that, have fun. The students will learn it in no time, and you're just going to have fun in your lessons. And last but not least, have a lot of patience. Also for yourself, cut yourself some slack, take it easy. You're doing fine, you're doing a great job. It's not all or nothing. And now, as we're finishing, you can relax and get excited before the school year. If you haven't started it yet, in Germany, they have already started in August, but in Poland, we start in September. So I assume you're starting in September. So I hope you find it helpful. And yeah, thank you very, very, very much.
Gosha, thank you very much. As usual, all the ideas you share with our participants, with our teachers, are of really help. I believe that all our participants who are now online and who will watch this day one in the form of the recording, they now know how to start a new school year with the very beginners, with the 6-year-olds. And what else I would like to do before we say goodbye to each other for today, I would like to remind all of us that except for grade 1, starting with grade 2, we are recommended to start the new school year with the diagnosis, to diagnose what they already know, what they remember. No, we do have these recommendations to do some diagnostic test or diagnostic work. And if you work with Academy Stars or with English World or with any other Macmillan course book, you do have 2 options. I, for a moment, will share my screen. Option number 1, in the teacher's resources, you do have the start of year resources. Where you can download and have a paper-based diagnostic paper, which will show what your kids remember from the previous year and after summer break. And also, it can be not in a paper form, but it can be computer-based. On our website, Macmillan Ukraine, we have this rubric testing, and for every course book which is approved by the Ministry of Education, we do have these diagnostic tests which are computer-based with automatic check, and you will have these results and this information to start the school year with some kind of revising. And if you would like to know more about how to revise in the very beginning of the school year, starting for grade 2, I would address you to our YouTube channel and last year Back to School, where Gosha shared her ideas and gave lots of different useful advice of how to revise in the beginning of the school year. Finally, if you would like to get to know the course book Academy Stars in more detail, I will now launch the poll, and I kindly ask you to take part in this poll. So there is only one question, and if you do want to have a closer look at our course Academy Stars, whatever level you wish, please say yes. If not, no, okay, it's no. If you are already working with Academy Stars, you choose the 3rd option, and it might happen so that for this moment, you are not working in the primary school, you are not working with the young learners, and again, it's also okay. I see that our participants are taking part in this poll, and I thank you very much. While you are taking this poll, I would like to remind all the participants that first of all, this webinar is being recorded, so everyone will get the recording before it comes on our YouTube channel. And the second thing, of course, you will receive the certificate. The only thing is that as well as you, I live in Ukraine, where we do have these temporary blackouts. So it might take some time for me to generate certificates for you due to the periods when I do have the electricity and the internet. And I see that most of the participants who would like to take part in the poll, they also voted. Thank you very much. Again, thank you, Gosha, for this wonderful masterclass and for your ideas. And I do look forward to your next talks at our events. Thank you very much. We
And I keep
love
saying
you.
that I love you too. And I keep saying that I just can't wait for the moment we meet in person. I'm really looking forward to it. I know it's going to happen soon. I know, I still believe it. And yeah, and as always, Slava Ukraini, and thank you very much. And see you hopefully in person soon. If not, then online. And good luck with the new school year. You're doing fine. You're amazing, taking everything into consideration. I'm just like so full of admiration and respect, and I'm so impressed. So you're really doing such a great job. You're the walking inspiration, all of you. So thank you very much also for doing that, and see you soon.
Thank you very much. Take care, stay safe, and see you tomorrow if you work with teenagers.
Take